Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here. My name's Brian. For this episode, we are going to be talking about Stanley Kubrick. And one of the films I feel like in his catalog is, despite its classic status, and it definitely has that, I feel like it's still a little tiny bit unsung in terms of the greater catalog. And this is a movie that's gotten a Criterion release, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I'm talking about Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory, and this film is from 1957. This is let's just talk about the disc for just a second. This is the 4K. This is the slipcover, and here is the reverse artwork. This comes from a brand new Dolby Vision HDR master from a 4K scan of the original camera negative. Looks beautiful with great detail, and I think that is pretty cool. This is obviously from Kino Lorber, and it's a really nice disc, I gotta say. I've read some great reviews of it already, and they're on the mark. Now, this film, I think, is one of the great films about war, and that is clearly a topic that would obsess Kubrick for, a good part of his career. I mean, if you think about his films on the whole, there's a lot of war and war-adjacent movies. You have direct war movies, Dr. Strangelove, Full Metal Jacket, and then you have things like, Barry Lyndon and Spartacus that are war adjacent. So clearly something about war and the human response to war, the absurdity of war was clearly something that he was obsessed with. I mean, this film begins, his examination of the absurdity of war, and then he takes it to a whole nother level with Dr. Strangelove, where it's just a flat-out comedy. This is a very dramatic, sobering movie, but a great, great film. And it's a film about bureaucracy, the bureaucracy of war and rank. And yeah, it's just one of those movies that every time I watch it, and I don't watch it a lot because it's a tough movie ultimately, every time I watch it, I am reminded how great it is. And this presentation definitely helped me appreciate it even more because it looks so good. But so what's the movie about? Okay. Paths of Glory, World War I. It's based in France. It's about the French army, although, the actors playing the roles are American actors for the most part. Apparently, at this point in World War I, the French have pushed the Germans back through a couple surprise counterattacks. They're in a good position, but, we could always do better is kind of the idea. And so then you have a general, as part of the general staff, played by Adolphe Menjou, who comes to one of his lower generals, played by George Macready, and tells him he wants Macready, his battalion, to take this very fortified German position called the Anthill. And initially, General Moreau, that's Macready, says, that's impossible. This is an incredibly fortified position. My men are tired, all this stuff. And then the Menjou character sort of waves a promotion in front of him. And he's like, well, actually, maybe we could do it. Suddenly convinces himself. There's a whole scene of him walking through the trenches. Some really great photography in the trenches. You get some great tracking shots that remind me of Saving Private Ryan. Like Spielberg, I know, has voiced, being obviously a big fan of Kubrick's films, and this one in particular, I think, really resonated with him because the tracking shots through the trenches where you can see the soldiers' faces, I think really, really reminded me of the very beginning of Saving Private Ryan, when you're in the boat with them. And then there's a battle sequence later that's the big money sequence of the movie, where the characters are running through no man's land. And that reminded me a bit of the Normandy invasion, although obviously, the difference between the graphic nature of the violence in a film from 1957 versus when Saving Private Ryan came out is two different things. One is way more intense, but for its time, I think this must have been a pretty powerful, portrait of war, to come out in 57, post-World War II. So anyway, the General Moreau tells his colonel, Dax, played by Kirk Douglas, who, took this movie because of what it was saying about war, because he wanted to make an interesting movie. And apparently Kubrick had initially, with Jim Thompson, who had worked on The Killing in the script, this is based on a novel, had changed the script when, Kirk Douglas sort of arrived at the production, and Kirk was like, "What did you do?" No. I want to do this movie because of the way the script was. And Kubrick, I guess, had wanted to make it more commercial. He had changed the ending, and basically Kirk was going to refuse to do it. And so they went back to the original script. And I'm glad they did, because it is, as I said, it's a powerful movie about war. It's a movie that's, again, about the absurdity of what men will be driven to do, and men's pride, and all these things that affect people's lives in the times of war. So Moreau goes to Dax, that's Douglas, and says, "I need you to do this, take this anthill." And Dax is also kind of like, "That's impossible. These guys are tired. I don't know if they can do it." And he's about to give him like a furlough. He's like, "Well, you look pretty exhausted. I'm going to put you on a leave." And he's like, no, I can't leave my men. And so he agrees to it. And they send the men the next day into battle after about a 15-minute artillery barrage. And there's some other stuff. There's some other subplotty stuff with one of the lower officers that definitely comes into play in the movie, but I'll leave that for you to see. But the idea is basically that the attack is not going to work, and that the general then, Moreau, orders the artillery to fire on his own men's positions, because the second wave of men won't come out of the trenches to attack, because they've seen the casualties. They're just getting wiped out. And so it becomes this matter of pride for the general. He's embarrassed. The man in the artillery unit says, "I won't fire on my men." And then basically he throws a fit and orders a court-martial, and the whole movie's sort of about the court-martial of these men, court-martial and execution. And so they are going to execute some men for cowardice, and it just becomes this whole battle, and the Colonel Dax character is just so sort of broken by this and angered by this whole process. And it's very sad, One of the soldiers, played by Timothy Carey, returning after the killing, is picked for trial and execution. And so there's just like some really big performances in terms of the Ralph Meeker is also one of the soldiers. And it's just one of those movies, you watch it and you feel the impact of it. It really makes you think and makes you kind of go, "Oh my God, this is crazy. How could this happen?" So yeah, it's just really, really powerful film, and definitely to be seen. I talked about the tracking shots, and the war scenes in the no man's land battlefield is really well done, as they're going to attack the anthill. Yeah, and it looks great in this Blu-ray, like I said, this 4K. Really, really good presentation. There is a podcast called Blank Check that I'm sure a lot of you have already been aware of and listened to. They're doing a Stanley Kubrick series right now. They just ran an episode on Paths of Glory, which I thought was great. And they brought out, they trotted out some fun little facts that I'm just going to throw in here at the end. Kubrick, notorious for asking for his actors to do a lot of takes. And Adolphe Menjou, a seasoned actor, having had a significant career before 1957, was not happy to be directed this way. And he doesn't have a ton of scenes in the movie. He has, one at the beginning, one in the middle, and a couple towards the end. But at some point, Kubrick, upset him by asking him to do multiple takes. He was trying to call for lunch himself, like saying, "I think we got it. This is Manju, not the director. That's my best take." And Kubrick was like, "Well, let's try it again." And Manju apparently flipped out, just lost it, full on, had a tantrum on the set, and just went on and on for a minute or two. I mean, more than a minute or two. And Kubrick just kind of let him blow himself out, and then said, "Let's try the scene again." And Manju was, I guess, just like either embarrassed or whatever about what he had done, and just kind of went and did it. And so it wasn't a great shoot in terms of that. And then I know Timothy Carey, similarly, Kubrick found very difficult to work with on this film. He has a much smaller role in The Killing, so I'd imagine it was easier to work with him and getting used to his style, which is like, if you ask Timothy Carey to do 10 takes, he will legitimately give you 10 different takes, like 10 different things. He wanted to do something different in every single take, and that's terrible for continuity. That's just, it doesn't work. But that's how Tim Carey wanted to act. So I guess that was problematic, and Kubrick was not excited about that, and they apparently fired him the minute they had the last shot they needed his face in it, and anything else they could do with doubles, they did. But there is a scene apparently in the movie where, they have a last meal kind of scenario. Timothy Carey has to eat a duck, and apparently he ate the duck 86 times or something like that. So that's fascinating to me. And let's see here. I guess he tried to stir up some publicity. I don't know if this was after he got fired. I guess it must have been. But he sort of pretended to have himself kidnapped. He had some guys like tie him up and throw him in the middle of the road, and the German police found him, and he claimed to be kidnapped, and just a crazy man. I mean, legit, like crazy. The fact that he worked as much as he did, for as crazy as he sounds to be, and I'm a huge Timothy Carey fan, actually. I think he brings like an energy like almost no other actor to just about any performance he ever did. But I think that's fascinating. And then lastly, I thought this was really interesting. George McCready, who plays the French General Moreau at the beginning, the one who's kind of like the dude you hate the most in this movie, was apparently friends with Vincent Price, and they opened an art gallery in 1943 in Beverly Hills. Apparently there wasn't a big art scene in LA at the time, and they wanted to have something for themselves. They called it the Little Gallery, and according to Vincent Price's daughter's biography, the rent for the small shop was $65 a month. The gallery is filled mainly with paintings and drawings that Price and McCready had purchased from their days in New York, pieces from their own collection, and works from California artists. And I guess it was a success. California artists and visiting artists were always coming in, as well as the crowd from a nearby bar. Even big celebrities turned up to buy art, including Charles Laughton, Otto Preminger, Greta Garbo, Katharine Hepburn, just to name a few. And I guess, unfortunately, Price and McCready did not have the time for their movie careers and for running the gallery, so it closed only a couple years later. But I do think that's fascinating, that if you think about George McCready and Vincent Price, they both are really distinct actors, distinct voices, and just to be hanging out in that art gallery in the 1940s would have been kind of a blast. Anyway, all fun stuff I learned from Blank Check. Definitely check out their show in that episode. Also featured on this disc, I'm totally burying the lead, but it's fantastic, an audio commentary by novelist and critic Tim Lucas, who I've talked about is one of my favorite film commentary gentlemen. And this track is his usual cup of fantastic. Great details about the production, Kubrick himself, the cast, just a whole lot of great stuff there. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. On top of a great transfer, you get a great commentary. So, as I said, really big thumbs up for Paths of Glory on 4K. Now, real briefly, if you haven't seen, this is the Criterion Blu-ray of the film. And what you're getting here, I mean, you do get a high-definition transfer there's no question this is the better transfer. But that said, this has an audio commentary from Gary Giddens, excerpt from 1966 audio interview with director Stanley Kubrick, television interview from 1979 with star Kirk Douglas, new video interviews with Kubrick's longtime executive producer Jan Harlan, Paths of Glory producer James B. Harris, and actress Christiane Kubrick, French television piece about the real-life World War I execution that partly inspired the film, plus a booklet featuring an essay by film scholar James Nairmore. So that's a pretty great disc, and I can't say that this, in the way of features, the Tim Lucas commentary is great, but it doesn't really make up for all the extra features you get on your Criterion. So kind of a toss-up, but definitely the picture quality goes to this new transfer, which is glorious. But yeah, I mean, as I said, really powerful movie about war, an ending that is truly moving and really gets you. Every time I watch it, I forget the ending. Somebody, talks about the ending, and I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of remember how that went. But to see the actual progression of the ending, the last scene, how it plays out, is, something that'll, I think, cook you every time, And so really good stuff. Glad that Kino has done this lovely 4K, and big thumbs up from me. So thank you for your time. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.